Hi, welcome to Celebrating Culture. In this episode, we're going to showcase St. Bernard Parish. In New Orleans, we have what's called the Wall. It's 72 miles long. There are gates on it. So when a storm comes, those gates are closed, and that allows protection for the city of New Orleans and inland communities. But if you live on the outside of the wall, you really have to be prepared because there's no way out once these gates are closed. Most of St. Bernard Parish is outside the wall. St. Bernard Parish is critical not only to Louisiana, but also to America. It's where a tremendous amount of our seafood comes from. And partnering with the fishermen who are working to restore the coast down there is a necessity. We're going to talk to the people in St. Bernard Parish and find out what's being done, not only to restore the coast, but to reduce the impact of storm surge. Celebrating Culture is brought to you by Awe News. Awe News also produces New Orleans Insider Tours, which are 10 self-guided tours of New Orleans and Louisiana. To download the apps, all you have to do is point your phone at the flow code in the camera mode, and you're ready to really experience Louisiana. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. To start our episode on St. Bernard Parish, we went to Fort Proctor, which is outside of Yclowsky and Shell Beach. Fort Proctor used to be accessible by land, and now it's about a 20-minute kayak run to get here. Blackie Campo's Marina is a place to launch. You get out here, you can really appreciate what's going on with coastal erosion. Today, you can see the fort is surrounded by water. It's been sinking. The land loss is dramatic. St. Bernard has had a lot of land loss over the last few decades. The history of Fort Proctor goes back to the Battle of New Orleans. On December 14th, 1814, there was a battle on Lake Borgne. The Americans lost. The British then went to New Orleans, and hence the Battle of New Orleans, which we won. Later, it was decided to build this fort to protect against future invasions by Britain. It wasn't complete until 1856, and in fact, it was never occupied. P.G.T. Beauregard of New Orleans was actually the civil engineer assigned to the fort. The structure is amazing. You can see the work more than 150 years later is still stable. There is no foundation problems, just the whole place is sinking. Definitely worth seeing before it's gone. I'm with Richie Blink, who's the outreach coordinator for Plaquemines Parish. Richie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Charles.
So, Richie, you've got a major project on your hands right now because coastal erosion is the topic. We've got 1 million people living below I-10. We're at Carnarvon right now, which I guess is where it starts in 1927.
Yeah, absolutely. So just upriver from here, the Mississippi River levee was blown to allow fresh water to bypass the city. The theory was that if that water could get out of the river as quick as it could, the water would just run faster past the city and the city of New Orleans could be saved.
That flood of 27 changed everything. I mean, I think 40% of the state was underwater, and then we created this levee system that didn't exist, or was amplified after that flood because it was so dramatic. And now we're paying the price because all that sediment just goes into the Gulf.
Absolutely. So after the Great Flood of 1927, Congress implored the Corps of Engineers to build a massive Mississippi River and tributary levee system that stretched all the way from Cairo, Illinois down to the Gulf of Mexico on both sides of the river. It was one of the biggest public works projects in the history of the planet at the time. Down in the delta, the sediment, it's confined in the river by the levees and it's jettisoned off the continental shelf. And so, from New Orleans down, the wetlands that are naturally sinking, as all deltas do, they're starved of sediment, and so there's high levels of erosion. The annual accretion that sediment would put on top of the land, that's not happening anymore, so there's high levels of subsidence that aren't being mitigated.
25 million cubic yards of sediment a year is what comes down the Mississippi. Is that about right?
It dwarfs the cargo that's carried on the river.
Louisiana almost didn't exist if we go back further enough, and that sediment was brought down, it developed Louisiana, and now we've confined it to one spot off the shelf.
Exactly. And so it's just making the Gulf of Mexico a couple inches shallower off of Southwest Pass every year, and it's not doing any good for the wetlands. But at the same time, the commercial fishermen have become used to using the basins as they're configured. For the last 80 or 90 years, they've built multi-generational businesses around having a certain salinity envelope.
What that means is you got the salt water in the Gulf of Mexico, and you got the fresh water in the Mississippi. And like oysters need a certain salinity to live on. So when you change that up and you say, hey, we got to divert stuff to rebuild the land again, you're changing the fresh water's being dumped into the Gulf water or the bays, and that's hurting the oysters.
Exactly. And that's something that needs to be worked out as we move forward.
You actually live in the area. Katrina hit you hard. So the other deal is that if you don't replenish the land, the next storm, there's no place for the people to live.
Absolutely. This is the challenge of our lifetimes, trying to figure out how to protect the coast enough to where we could still have civilization in Louisiana. And there's going to be a lot of hard choices that are going to have to be made. Communities like mine are beyond a cost-benefit ratio of being saved, and that's incredible. That's people's lives. That's the Louisiana culture itself is being affected by the work that was done in the early 30s to build these levees.
We're also seeing that this wall was built. I mean, with 30-foot gates on the roads that would stop the storm at a certain point, but if you're on the opposite side of the wall, you're in trouble.
Definitely.
But here, we can see there's a lot of sediment coming through. So as you guys are, the challenge also, I guess, is to figure out these diversions, how to get the most sediment in a diversion too.
It's bold action, but it's based on science. And the Mississippi River is what built Louisiana in the first place. And it's going to rebuild, vast amounts of marsh. We're facing 2 to 4 feet of sea level rise in Louisiana. This is what the state is endorsing, and there's other indications that those levels might even be higher. So I think the best that we could hope for at this point is a controlled retreat. People need to be aware, of what they're facing, and they need to, take that information and use that when they're deciding where to invest.
The graphs, the charts, you see that red and see this is going to be gone, and this is the best case, and this is the worst case. It is alarming. At the same time, it's not almost out of our control, the sea level rise. That is something that is going to be a global concern.
I think in Louisiana we have the opportunity to lead by example. The biggest cause of global climate change is carbon emissions, and our economy is based largely on that. And so you have folks that live in my community that they rely on the oil and gas industry as their means of income, but it's going to swallow their community eventually.
The diversion brings not only just the water and the mud, but it also brings fertilizer and seeds and just starts a whole new ecosystem. As you go through it, you can see that it starts to replenish the delta.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take that long.
So we'll head up to the new delta that's forming just here in a second, and you're going to be pleasantly surprised what the river has created in just a short amount of time. So I want y'all to take a look how there's you can see there's new sediment that's being accreted on top of the land here. What happens is when the tide is high and the diversion is running and the land is over top, sediment is deposited on top of that land, and the hope is with the big diversions that can keep up with sea level rise.
What we have here, this is new delta.
Yeah, this is a new delta formed by the Carnarvon diversion, and the Carnarvon diversion was actually set up just as a salinity control structure. It wasn't even designed to pick up sediment like the planned diversions that are going to be south of here.
And we can see this would also be great for migratory birds, has a lot of other benefits.
Yeah, wetlands are an excellent carbon sink. They store that carbon down in the earth. You're absolutely right. This is an excellent habitat.
That water actually, it's got a lot of surplus fertilizer from the farms. So I'm gathering that does help this grow very well. Not getting to the Gulf and the dead zone area is probably a benefit as well, that it's going to be used to grow plants where it can.
Wetlands definitely can be used to reduce nitrogen that's in the water.
Lake Pontchartrain Basin, they created a lot of the trees that we just passed out here.
Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation and Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana have been planting thousands of cypress trees in this area.
Why cypress?
Cypress is it's impervious to rot. It's resistant to termites.
You're looking around though, it's as far as you can see. This is all new.
Yeah, this is a new delta.
I mean, it's
here.
an amazing amount of land that's been recreated from this, I'll say minor diversion, so to speak.
And the Carnarvon diversion hasn't been operated in the last 3 years. We've been missing out on that land building opportunity. And so the existing diversions that were designed as salinity control structures, we need to reevaluate them. How can we operate them to achieve the maximum land building efficiency? How can you maximize the efficiency of these structures while impacting the fishery minimally?
You guys aren't just doing one project. It's not just diversion. It's pipelines, terracing, barrier islands.
For sure. There's a lot of different tools in the toolbox, and there's multiple lines of defense strategy, starting at the Gulf of Mexico with barrier islands, marshes, bridges, levees, vegetation planted in front of the levees to knock down waves, ultimately raised homes, and then an evacuation route. So there's a lot of different things we could do to mitigate against storm surge.
We actually went out and we saw where they're growing premium oysters now on the surface. So there are people trying to figure out how to keep the seafood industry around by different techniques. And LSU built a $3 million facility in Grand Isle to help with the oystering. There's a lot of things at play to make this morph to the 21st century and beyond.
Definitely. It's important to look at the past, but also where we're headed, and there's a lot of really great opportunities coming up to where we can get out ahead of this and do the most good.
Well, Richie, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Definitely.
All the work you guys are doing is phenomenal. And it is like 6,000 people coordinating. That is a big orchestra. Thanks for all you're doing.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today with Dr. Bonny Schumaker, who started in Wisconsin, then went out to California where she was with NASA. Later, she went to Antarctica as she got involved with the environment. And then she came to New Orleans to help after the BP oil spill and has stayed and can talk to us a lot about coastal restoration and what she sees from the air. Bonny, welcome to the show.
Hi, Charles.
So Bonny, you've been here how many years now?
Going on 9 years.
And you fly out a lot checking out what's been going on with the oil spill. That was how it really brought you here.
That's what brought me here, finding the animals before they burn and looking where the oil was, flying people studying oil, people looking for animals.
And then you wrote a book about it.
That was just a little fun book because I saw so many pelicans. I just thought that was just an amazing thing, the things that live here. I do really love the wetlands. The wetlands here I thought were extraordinary. I mean, I'd been all over the world protecting marine life, and then I had never been to these barrier islands and never really seen the animals in the Gulf. So here it was in my backyard, an oil spill, and all of a sudden animals that I hadn't even appreciated are being affected profoundly.
We also had them losing habitat. So the habitat was lost from coastal erosion, pipelines, just islands disappearing. When we flew with you 2 years ago, we left out of New Orleans. We saw Delacroix, you took us to show what was going on in St. Bernard. Then we went out to Breton Island, Grand Isle, Cocoa-Tree, Ile de Jean Charles. It was a great run that we had to experience what is really going on in this part here of Louisiana.
And if we did that same trip now, all of those places you just mentioned have shrunk. They're skinnier.
What's going on in the last couple of years since we flew with you?
There are small restoration efforts, but they are very successful. They're just small compared to the amount of erosion and loss of landmass that's occurring on a larger scale. But smaller efforts like the West Bay diversion, the southern Mississippi River, are beautiful. I mean, willow trees are everywhere now.
Does it take long for that sediment to create willow trees?
That is extremely rich sediment. So in the course of 2 years, you suddenly see stuff. I'm told that the pigs are flourishing too. But no, it works. Anytime you can dredge from the Mississippi River and pump it back into the wetlands or do anything to get it into the wetlands, you will grow land.
We flew with you last time. We went all the way out to Breton Island.
What was left of Breton Island?
Yes.
When I flew with you, it was much smaller than it was in 2010. When I first saw it, that large round enclosure that was an institute at one time, and about Teddy Roosevelt a century ago.
I'm a big fan of what he did a century ago.
Yeah,
I thought when he made that a preserve,
right.
and it showed that how much he loved birds and how you have to protect the habitat.
He did do that, and there was an institute, not much left of that. There's really not much left of the island. I mean, in 2010, when I first saw it, the coast was large enough that you could have landed and taken off a small plane. Right now, it would be very difficult. You might be able to land, but you probably couldn't take off.
So the brown pelican, though, we're seeing, is it starting to flourish? Is it making a stronger comeback?
I can't say that. All the places where I saw rookeries of brown pelicans back in 2010, most of those aren't there, particularly the ones around Barataria Bear. There are not rookeries. There are small numbers of birds there, but nothing like I saw in 2010.
So islands are needed because that's a safe place away from mammals for birds.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if most people think about that connection, that a bird wants an island or the marshlands of Louisiana or where they want to lay their eggs.
A rookery where you're going to have the whole colony live and raise their young and flourish and teach the young what they want to know needs to be in a safe place. And it is not safe on the mainland. It's not safe anywhere that vehicles or pigs or other animals can get to the nests. The more remote the island or the more isolated by water, the better.
Fish seem to want to find coves in an island, so I guess the fishing's better for a bird too.
Yeah, fishing's better for the bird too.
So as we restore the area, it does help. It is, I guess, minimizing the loss right now.
That's all it is right now. But everywhere we've tried to restore, it's magnificently successful.
It's sort of time for Louisiana to end procrastination on these issues.
Thank you.
There's a conflict there between the oyster-men and the fishermen and the restoration people?
That is a problem, yeah. But farther down there, I don't think there's the argument from the oyster-men, no. So you're just rebuilding wetlands there. So I guess you have to pick where you're going to do it. But anywhere you do it, you get some of that fertile Mississippi sludge in there, and it's a good thing.
And again, your website is?
It's called onwingsofcare.org.
So I look forward to checking with you, hopefully sooner than 2 years,
Okay.
as to how things are going.
All right.
Bonnie, thanks.
You bet.
And stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. We're now at Delacroix Island with Captain Randall Shaw. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
How long have you been down here?
I've been down here full time now 5 years.
5 years. You've seen a lot of change going on.
Yeah, I have. I've seen a lot.
We're at Lake Leary.
Right.
And I understand there's a lot of dredging right where we are.
Yes, there's a project going on right now the Army Corps is just finishing up. What we're looking at is basically Carnarvon diversion is on the top side of Lake Leary. That's where they've been pumping all the sediment through from out the river. It's controlled diversion. Over the years, Lake Leary has gone from 8 feet to 3 feet. 4 feet, so somewhere in that area.
So there's a lot of sediment coming into Lake Leary.
A lot of sediment coming into Lake Leary. And what they've done is Army Corps put out a contract to actually take the land that ended up in Lake Leary and dredge it up and throw it up on the banks, and that's what we're looking at here.
So all this ridge, everything, the pipeline we see is still here.
Yeah, that's all from the dredging. They're just finishing up the project as we speak.
Fish tend to want to be around an island.
Yeah, the marsh, the points and pockets and all that is where the fish want to feed at. They want breaks and currents. Eventually we're going to lose what we have. Needless to say, it goes as a chain. The fish have fins and the fish can swim around. The oysters can't. So that's where it kind of starts. Those are the guys who are going to lose first. Then it'll go up the chain. You know, from what I've talked to crabbers and stuff, local crabbers that we deal with, they've kind of already switched their pattern of where they go. The speckled trout are more, salt dependent. Year after year, we're seeing less and less in one area, more and more in another area where it's saltier, further away from these freshwater diversions. The redfish thrive more in fresh water, but if we lose the banks, pockets, ponds, we're eventually going to lose those.
So you have to do a lot of adapting right now as a charter fisherman. But I understand you guys are doing a great job because we also have tourism coming in New Orleans, and Delacroix is a great place to fish.
Yes, Delacroix, we're really thriving on our fishing right now, but we have to look at the future a lot too.
I saw you guys have built a phenomenal lodge, and that allows people that are coming in for the conventions, whoever want to have a corporate retreat, to come down to Delacroix. And I used to come down with my dad. So a lot of us in Louisiana have a connection to Delacroix and Shell Beach. We have to morph a little bit, and you guys have figured out a way to do that.
Yeah, because when we're so close to downtown New Orleans, we've partnered with a lodge and built up a big complex here, and it was part of the conversation when we built it of, is this place going to be here? Is this worth the investment? They're trying to build coast, they're making some progress, but I still don't think they're even at a level where they're keeping up with the loss that they're putting back, let alone catching up. And that's where the big issue comes in.
They've got a lot of challenges on hand to do that.
Yeah, they're doing some great work here. This is really good for Lake Leary in this, but this is such a small portion of what the problem is. This will never keep up with the losses.
Right now, are we on a canal?
Yes, we're on a pipeline actually. This was a pipeline.
So this is one of the problems.
Yeah, this is one of those pipelines that they cut through here that, from my understanding of when these oil companies came through here, whatever damage they did to the land they were supposed to fix. Well, these guys did their work, left, and
we have this pipeline, and this allowed the fresh water and the salt water to
it just keeps opening up more and more. There's so many pipelines running through Delacroix different ways that eventually you just keep opening.
When you look at the map from the 60s to today, it is unbelievable how it is disintegrated, so to speak.
It really has. We fish an island one year and we don't get any hurricanes, no big events, nothing. You go back the next year and the island's not there. You can drive over it and see it, the mud in the motor, so it's still barely a hump, but that'll be gone the next year or two. Once the grass is gone, that's the end of it. This is every stage of coastal erosion that you would see, from a full island to a half of island to down to an island over here who's got 2 lumps of grass left on it, to this one who has nothing on it. When the water's high, it turns into nothing. It'll eventually flatten out from this and turn wide open.
So a few years ago, this was actually solid.
Yes, this was actually an island, which you see right here. This was an island with a bunch of grass on it right here. Once the grass died, it slowly started deteriorating. Now on water's regular height or high, you can't see it. Really, really low water like we have today from the west wind blowing 30, 40 miles an hour, you can actually see it. Like I said, the ones you could see who have, 4 or 5 pieces of grass, clumps of grass sticking up on it, that's all you normally see. And once that's gone, it just deteriorates, and it happens very quickly.
But we're seeing with Carnarvon, though, the lake level is rising, the bottom of the lake level is rising, and they're able now to start pump that around to maybe save some of these areas here.
They just only have so much funding for certain areas, and that's where it stopped. They picked certain banks and worked up those banks, and that's where they're at with it.
So now when you have a windstorm, it moves the water a lot faster.
It becomes a big issue with a hurricane. I don't think a lot of people realize how much that marsh buffered these storms that would come hit us. Because we see it all the time. People are like, oh, can y'all fish today? Sure, we can always fish. We're protected.
Right.
But when you lose the protection, you can't fish. And I think that goes the same with the hurricanes. When you lose the protection, they do a lot more devastation.
Yeah. Randy, you have a really successful fishing charter business here.
Oh, they find us through lacharters.com, la-charters.com. And like I said, the fishing's thriving. There's no doubt the red fishing's phenomenal. But, we talked about once again, it's just a matter of time. So you might want to come down and enjoy it now.
But if you're coming down from New Orleans to go to a convention, or you're going to be in the Quad and you want to get away and you want to see what's going on, your lodge, you got a jacuzzi.
Yeah, we have a full-service lodge that has bartending, housekeeping, general manager, full-time chef.
Shuttle.
Shuttle to downtown New Orleans back and forth.
Well, I want to thank you for all you contributing to Louisiana, and we'll be right back. Down in Yclowsky, Louisiana with Brad Robin. Brad, welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
Now understand.
Welcome to Yclowsky.
This is a beautiful place. How long has it been here?
Well, since the 1800s.
And your family?
My family, some of the family are the first founders of this town.
We see Robin when we drive into town. You've got an RV park. You're loading up a lot of oysters, a lot of shrimp. How big are you guys?
We were way bigger than we are now. Katrina knocked us off the map a little bit, but in the fishing industry, we're probably 7 generations.
7 generations?
In the fishing.
Wow, now understand, like your dad actually was one of the first people to go out to Breton Island.
My dad used to make a living off of Breton Island fishing with rod and reel and different nets, what they call seines and stuff like that, off of Breton Island.
And this going back to the 40s?
Back to the 40s. This business was established in 1947.
And right now you supply most of the restaurants in New Orleans.
I supply a great deal of New Orleans.
But to do that, you've got to morph. There's a lot of changes. BP, there's hurricanes, coastal erosion. What are you guys doing? How are you surviving to keep your family history going?
One thing about a fisherman is resilient. They always look for ways to come back. We don't look for handout. We look to go out and do it. And a hurricane, we've been having hurricanes since 1940. When a hurricane hits, it puts a film or a silk on our beds. We go out there with our rakes, this thing right here, and we move the stuff around and remove the debris and stuff off the reefs, and the reefs can come back. What we would do different if a Katrina hits now, well, for one thing, we have the greatest wall that's ever built. I call it the Great Wall of China.
I call it the Great Wall of Louisiana, actually, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, I really think that's the answer to survivor. The problem is before we had ridges, which we're talking about Barry Islands. Ridges that were from here into Breton Island, you have ridges that kind of slow down the tide in the water. Katrina wiped that all out. It's just a flat plain, level ground.
Now that's also causing some issues because obviously with the coastal diversions they're talking about now and the levees, that also puts in a lot of fresh water, a little bit of stress on harvesting and the water salinity.
It's a devastating situation for this oyster. This oyster needs perfect world where we would say a little salt and a little freshness. Too much fresh, it'll die. Too much salt, it'll die. So you need a balance. The state of Louisiana, due to man-making diversions, levees, and stopping waterways to get in all other areas, changed the nature of our growing, and it's drastically. So the industry is suffering. When Katrina hit, we was back to about 85 and 90% back to our capacity. Then we got all back to normal. We were happy. BP came in. We lost everything. Didn't know where we were going to start. So we was wondering how we were going to get back to normal. You need something to start. Some of the areas never had nothing. Some of them still don't have nothing. As of today, in the market in this part of the east side of the river, we are probably about 75% off since BP hit.
Wow.
Now, I understand you were crushing rock and you guys taking it into your own hands to bring back the areas.
After Katrina, we thought all the slabs from all the devastation in New Orleans and St. Bernard, they had mounds and mounds of crushed concrete. Come up with an idea, my brothers and I, and said, hey, how's about let's crush some of this concrete and see what it did. So we took the devastation of the Katrina, took the slabs, crushed it, and we're putting it in the water. That grows this oyster. We had to introduce to the water a new culch, which is this stuff, the shells, a culch that oysters can grow on to the base, because our old culch, the old shells that was down in there would not grow.
Okay.
We couldn't get them to grow. So we introduced new material at perfect timing, and they grew oysters. So out of the devastation of a hurricane, we got back to this. But the cost factor, before, myself and other shops used to shuck their own product, and we'll put thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of shells back in the water. When you're getting it from your shop, it's kind of like one hand washes the other.
Sure.
The shop's paying for it, we put it in the water, and we didn't know how much value it was to it. Now we don't have our shops, so then we went to the crushed concrete. Now we reversed from doing it with as much cost to spending millions. Right now, the shops are starving.
Wow.
People don't realize how hard this industry is hurting.
So you guys have taken on yourself to reinvigorate the area of St. Bernard and the waterways for your family, for your culture, for the community to keep on going.
This town last year put over 200,000 tons of couch material in the marsh,
Wow.
in that water.
Perfect.
Now that does two things. We get it when it grows, but we also putting a foundation in the marsh that you can't see it. It ain't Berry Islands or high. It is something that's under the water, but it's a strong foundation.
Sure.
And it's a foundation to the marsh. You know what's the most rewarding thing to me out of all this? When you go to these fine restaurants and you don't know that they eating your product, and and they see that smile on your face, you say, that's success.
That is success. All right. Brett, you are a success. Thanks for being on the show. We're going to go see some oysters and we'll be right back.
Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. St. Bernard Parish is making a tremendous effort on coastal restoration and storm protection. As you can see, on an average windy day, a little bit of wave action can do a lot of damage. Here you can see broken concrete being used as a buffer to prevent coastal erosion. Further off the coast, we're using terracing. Terracing is great because these plots of land block sediment that comes down the Mississippi River in a very cost-efficient manner of forming acreage, which allows nesting for birds and coastal protection. Louisianans are strongly committed to coastal restoration and protecting our home. And we hope you'll get involved in protecting our coast so that we can preserve the culture of Louisiana, which makes it so special and so unique for so many people.